The communion wine tasted like copper pennies in rain. That was the first thing I noticed when I raised the chalice and looked out over my congregation. 43 pairs of hollow, empty eye sockets stared back at me. They sat perfectly still in the pews, spines straight, hands folded, like they'd been practicing good posture for decades. Because they had. My name is Father Ezekiel Mororo, and I am the appointed caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. Let me tell you what that really means. Cue soft creaking sound of wooden pews shifting. Each morning, as the first rays of sun touch the stained glass windows, I begin the service. But not until the bell tolls exactly 5 times. Rule 1. The service must start on the 5th toll. Rule 2. Every prayer must be spoken 3 times. No more, no less. Rule 3. The offering bowl must contain something from the living world. Rule 4. The dead may not speak during sacred hours. Rule 5. The altar candles must remain burning until the sun sets. I learned these rules the hard way. Early in my tenure, I only repeated the Lord's Prayer twice. Constance Blackwood, 3rd pew, white wedding dress, deceased 1847, turned her skull toward me so slowly that the sound of her neck bones still haunts my quiet moments. Whispered echo, "Our Father, who art in heaven." The congregation mouthed the words silently, their jawbones clicking, their dry tongues brushing against teeth that haven't seen enamel in over a century. Matthias Grimm, front row, died choking on communion bread in 1823. He still bears the indentation where the wafer lodged. He takes the rules seriously. If you're still listening, things are about to take a turn. Door creak SFX. A knock interrupted the sacred rhythm. Now here's where you lean in, because the living rarely come here. The chapel has been missing from maps since 1975, but sometimes they still find us. That day, a young woman showed up, soaked to the bone, terrified, claiming her car broke down. Said her name was Sarah. She wasn't like other wanderers. She felt different, not just lost, but drawn. When she walked in, all 43 skulls turned toward her, and yet none spoke. She shivered and started backing toward the door. But I stopped her. Please don't leave during sacred hours. It's not safe, because once the bell tolls, the line between this world and the next thins. And leaving then, well, there are things in the forest that make my congregation look friendly. As the service continued, I noticed something. Sarah started praying with us. Her voice, alive and warm, merged with mine. The congregation leaned in, captivated. And then I saw her do it. She touched her forehead. That's when I knew. She saw them. The carvings. The rules. Not everyone can. Only those marked. Quick pause for eerie music cue. She joined me in the vestry afterward, where I offered her shelter. We spoke. Her last name? Combe. It chilled me. I flipped through the old attendance journal, and there it was. Marcus Combe, my predecessor. He served for 48 years. Died in 2010. Buried in plot 44. And yes, chosen by the congregation for eternal service. Sarah was his great-niece. Now she was seeing the rules too. That night, the storm broke. Rain like coins fell into the sacred bucket. The candles flickered. The dead tended to the cemetery. Sarah watched, stunned, as they worked with purpose. If you're still here, watching, maybe you were meant to. Maybe you can see the carvings too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you've ever felt like you belong somewhere you've never been before. Back in the parsonage, she told me about her grandfather's stories of Father Marcus. She asked me to tell her the truth. So I did. Yes, they're all dead. Yes, they serve faithfully. And yes, she had a choice to make. Stay and take up the caretaker's robe, or leave before sunrise and forget it all. That night, she walked the cemetery, read the names, learned their stories. And when dawn broke, she made her decision. The chapel bell rang 5 times. Sarah stood beside me, the new caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. Marcus Combe nodded his approval. The carvings on her forehead glowed softly. She drank the wine. It still tasted like copper pennies in rain. But this time she smiled. Soft music swells. Some callings are inherited. Some are chosen. The best ones are both. And at St. Bartholomew's Chapel, the eternal service continues. The dead don't sing on Wednesdays. That's Rule 7. I didn't know that until last week. I'm Sarah Combe, caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. And this is the next part of my story. You already know about the service, The rules. The congregation of 43 dead souls who rise every morning to attend worship and tend their own graves at dusk. But what you don't know, what I didn't know, is that some rules aren't carved in bone. Some are buried. It started with a voice. Not during service, not during prayer. No, it came on a Wednesday, while I was polishing the altar rails. A voice that didn't belong to anyone in the chapel. It came from beneath the chapel floor. A child's voice. Soft, muffled, singing. Rock of Ages, clef for me, but slower, off-key, like it had forgotten the tune, but remembered the hunger. I froze, because that hymn is sacred here, and the dead don't sing on Wednesdays. I thought maybe it was a memory, or something leaking from the space between worlds. That happens sometimes. But then it sang again. Let me hide myself in the... Scratching noises follow. Under the floorboards. Something was moving. I grabbed the ceremonial shovel from the supply room. Yes, there's a ceremonial shovel. Don't ask why. I followed the singing to the back corner of the chapel, behind the old organ. The hymn had stopped, but the scratching continued. I peeled back the rug, revealing a trapdoor I'd never seen before. No hinges, just an iron ring in the wood, slick with something too dark to be rainwater. When I pulled it open, a wave of warm air hit me, like someone had exhaled from furnace. And then I saw them. Steps, carved into the stone, spiraling down into flickering red light. I should have gone for the journal, or at least waited for morning. But something pulled me forward. Something hungry. Add eerie ambient sound here. The deeper I went, the colder I felt. Not temperature, something deeper. Like parts of me were being taken. The hallway at the bottom was lined with mirrors. All cracked, all covered in a thin film of ash. Each mirror reflected something wrong. My face, but older. Eyeless. Screaming. That's when I heard the voices again. Dozens of them. Whispers like dry leaves. Caretaker, you weren't told all the rules. Some songs awaken things we buried too deep. The choir remembers. And then they began to sing. 43 voices. But not my congregation. These voices were younger. Lighter. Children. Their hymn was broken, filled with coughing and wheezing, like they'd been choking on dust for centuries. I reached the end of the hallway. A stone door marked with a single sentence, carved deep in the rock. Rule 7. The choir must not sing. I don't remember opening the door, but I did. Inside were pews. Tiny pews, filled with child-sized skeletons in choir robes blackened by flame. Their eye sockets turned toward me as one, and then they screamed. High-pitched, endless, the kind of sound that unravels your sanity thread by thread. I ran, up the stairs, out of the trapdoor, slamming it shut behind me. And then, silence. But the mirrors down there, one had shown me. Not screaming, not crying, just conducting, like a choir director, like someone who had let the singing start. The next morning, the number of congregation members had changed. 43 adults still sat in their pews. But now, in the back row, a child sat too. She wore a soot-stained robe. No eyes, no jaw, but her fingers tapped the hymn book in time with the morning service. No one else reacted, except Marcus. He turned his skull toward me and bowed his head, slowly. That's when I checked the attendance journal. New ink. My handwriting. Entry 7. The choir awoke. One has returned. Further action pending. I didn't write that. At least, not when I remember doing it. Add soft organ music here. Slightly out of tune. Back in the chapel. The child sings during services now. Only during service. Only when I don't look at her directly. And only when the bell tolls 5 times. But sometimes, I hear humming. On Wednesdays. Even when no one else is there. And I wonder how many more rules were buried because they were too dangerous to carve in a bone. I'm still the caretaker. But now I know. The dead don't sing on Wednesdays. Unless someone lets them remember how. If this second story from St. Bartholomew's chilled you to the bone, stay tuned. There are more rules to uncover. More doors beneath the chapel. And more voices that haven't sung in centuries. Now starting the next story. The chapel bell rang 6 times that morning. It was only supposed to ring 5. Always 5. That's rule 1. And the moment that 6th toll echoed across the cemetery, I knew something had changed. I'm Sarah Combe, caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. And this is what happened the morning the rules rewrote themselves. The bell rope moved on its own. I'd been outside, tending fresh lilies on Father Mororo's grave when it began, slow, deliberate tolls. 5 I expected. 5 has become comfort. Routine. Worship. But then came the 6th, and the birds stopped singing. I looked up at the bell tower. No wind. No movement. But I swear the wood beneath the bell looked wet, like something had climbed down a rope after ringing it. The chapel door creaked open behind me, and when I turned, every member of the congregation was standing silently outside the church. They never do that. They never leave the sanctuary before the service begins. Their skulls tilted toward me, waiting, expectant, and for the first time, I felt judged. I hurried to ring the proper 5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the rope didn't budge. It was slimy, like someone had soaked it in blood and rainwater. Inside, I found the altar candles already lit, dripping black wax instead of white. Father Maroro never mentioned this. I opened the leather-bound journal, the one caretakers used to log daily attendance, and there was a fresh entry already written. Entry 78. The 6th bell means the door will open. Prepare the basin. Do not let it whisper your name. I hadn't written that, but the ink was still drying. The door? I flipped frantically through the older pages. No mention of any door. But toward the back, I found a torn page marked with a warning. Do not speak to the voice in the nave when the 6th bell tolls. It remembers who it used to be. That's when I heard it. A low voice. Wet. Whispering. From the shadows behind the organ. Studio microphone. Sarah Combe. You're late for your baptism. I backed away, nearly knocking over the offering bowl. The water inside had turned black, roiling like oil, and it was humming. Low and steady, like it was hungry. The congregation hadn't moved. 43 skulls just staring at the altar. Except now, there was a 44th. I didn't recognize her. A young woman, mouthless, with moss growing from her collarbones and strings of wet hair hanging down her skull like drowned seaweed. Her eye sockets were full of mud, and etched into her forehead, deeper than the rest, was a new rule. Rule 10. When the 6th bell tolls, do not look down. I looked down, and the floor was breathing. I ran to the supply closet, grabbed the ceremonial shovel, the bone-handled crucifix, and the hymnal. The pages had turned black, and the words rearranged themselves. 6 bell rings, and down they come. From dripping bell and crawling drum. Don't give it name, don't give it face. Don't let it step into your place. The whisper came again. Studio microphone, you were chosen. You read the rules. You look down. The trapdoor that had once hidden the choir of ashes was now open again, but the staircase beneath had changed. Instead of stone, it was flesh. Pale, veined flesh. Pulsing with each breath the chapel floor took. I couldn't stop myself. I stepped down once, twice, and then I saw it. At the base of the stairs was the door. A smooth stone circle covered in bone-white handprints, all child-sized, and one fresh, red one, the size of my own. As I watched, the handprint moved, slid slowly across the stone like it was pulling something behind it. Something wet. The door began to open. Black water spilled out, flooding the steps, and within it floated faces. Not skulls. Faces. Still fresh. Still whispering. One of them was mine. The mouth moved, and the voice said, Studio microphone. If you step through, you take your seat. 44 is waiting. He wants to sing. I turned and ran. Up the stairs. Into the chapel. The congregation was gone. The pews were empty except for one figure at the altar. Father Ezekiel Maroro. No longer skeletal. His body had reformed, rotted, but whole. His eyes were turned, and they were weeping black tears. You answer the 6, he said. The door only opens once per caretaker. And now it's your choice. He opened his palm. Inside were 2 things. A key made of bell metal, and a vial filled with what I realized was my own blood. The key closes the door, he said. The vial completes the baptism. I backed away, but behind me, I heard them coming. 43 skeletons returning to the pews. Except now, they all have faces. Not theirs. Mine. Each one wearing a twisted version of my features. Smiling, crying, screaming. Choose, Ezekiel said. Service or silence. And then I understood. If I took the key, I could seal the door, but I'd lose the ability to see the rules. The gift would pass to another, someone unready, someone like a child, or worse, someone called to serve but eager to twist the rules. But if I took the vial, I'd accept my place as keeper of the 6th door. A role not even Maroro accepted. The vial was warm in my hand. Thick, sweet smelling. I drank. The moment it passed my lips, the candle flames turned blue. The door slammed shut below, and a new rule carved itself into my skull. Rule 11. Those who seal the door become its guardian. The 6th hole is theirs to command. Now, on the 6th day of every month, I toll the bell 6 times. The congregation sings without mouths. The candles burn cold, and I sit at the altar with a mirror behind me, so I never forget what my face looks like, in case they try to wear it again. If you heard the bell just now, if it echoed in your ears like it did in mine, don't look down. Not today. Not until you're ready to see your own reflection crawling back up the stairs. This is St. Bartholomew's Chapel, and the service never ends. Story 4. The ground behind the chapel had always held 45 plots. It was a number I came to know well. As the caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Chapel, each grave was familiar, each name a part of the silent symphony that filled the pews during sacred hours. I knew them by their headstones, by their deaths, by the way their bones shifted when I lit the candles. 45 graves, 43 regular attendees, one plot always empty, one newly filled. But then, one cold October morning, I found a 46th. No headstone, no markings, just a mound of earth at the edge of the cemetery, nestled beneath the twisted remains of a dead yew tree. The ground was darker there, wetter, as if the dirt itself was trying to breathe. I approached carefully, holding the attendance journal in one hand and the ceremonial crucifix in the other. No one had rung the chapel bell yet. The air was still, thick with fog that hadn't lifted despite the hour. The kind of fog that smells like damp books and regret. Plot 0. That's what it was labeled in the journal. The ink had bled as if the page resisted holding the name. No one had spoken of it. Not even Father Mororo in his final weeks. Not even Marcus Combe in the pages of his journal. A blank space, physically present but spiritually denied. Until now. That morning, it was no longer empty. The dirt was freshly turned, and not by my hand. I keep records. Nothing had been buried. Nothing had been scheduled. The ceremonial shovel still sat in the supply closet, untouched since the last funeral offering. I crouched beside the mound, laid my palm flat on the soil. It was warm, like a living thing. From the corner of my eye, I saw them gathering. The congregation. But something was wrong. They stood at the edge of the cemetery, not crossing the gravel path that separated the chapel grounds from plot 0. Temperance Ashford, Matthias Grimm, even Barnabas Frost with his always polite nod. All of them watched. None of them moved closer. Not even to ring the bell. This wasn't part of the service. This was something else. Who's in there? I whispered aloud. My voice sounded foreign, like it came from beneath the earth. And then I heard it. A knocking. 3 times. From beneath the mound. Like fingers tapping a coffin lid. Only, there had never been a coffin in plot 0. By evening, I had convinced myself I imagined it. The fog, the silence, the isolation of the sacred place, it plays tricks. But when I entered the chapel, I found the pews disturbed. Not just used. Disturbed. As if something had been crawling over them. A dark, wet trail ran from the back row to the altar. The floorboards groaned, not from weight, but from memory. That night, the rain began again. I placed the bucket beneath St. Peter's window, as always. But the first drop sizzled. Steam rose where it landed. The bucket shook. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, journal in hand, watching the graveyard. At 3:13 a.m., a figure stepped out of the fog. Not one of my congregation. Not one of 43. This one walked differently. Head low, arms too long, dressed in clothes I didn't recognize. Not 1800s formal wear. Not funeral attire. Just gray, colorless. And his feet left no tracks. He moved past the others. They didn't look at him. They didn't acknowledge him. As if he didn't belong. As if he couldn't be seen. But I saw him. And when he reached the chapel door, he knocked. Not like a visitor. Like a warning. 3 times. I didn't answer. Not at first. I waited. Watched. Tried to breathe. Then came the whisper. Caretaker, you left me out. The voice was close. Too close. Right behind my ear. I turned, and nothing was there. But when I looked back through the window, so was he. Gone. Just the fog. And the path. And the mound at plot 0. The next service was wrong from the start. The bell rang 5 times. Then rang once more, all by itself. I didn't pull the rope. No one did. Rule 1. Only 5 tolls. My hand was shaking as I stepped to the altar. I began the prayers. 3 times, as instructed. And the congregation joined silently. But their rhythm was off. They kept glancing back. To the back row, where a new figure now sat. Not moving. Not folding his hands. Just watching me. His skull was different. Pale but not bleached by time. No carvings. No rules. And where his forehead should be, there was only a smoothed out surface. Blank. Now, coming to our last story. I nearly dropped the chalice. When I blinked, he was closer. 2 pews ahead. Nobody reacted. No one even turned their heads. It was like I was the only one who could see him. So I did what Father Mororo taught me. I turned to the congregation. Let us rise, I said, voice trembling. All 43 skeletons stood. So did the visitor. His legs unfolded in ways that felt unnatural. Not broken. Not monstrous. Just wrong. And when he opened his mouth, no words came. Only dirt. Thick, black soil poured from his jaw, soaking the floorboards. And then, from the silence, came a single word. Remember. The congregation did not react. But I did. Because I knew that voice. From my dreams. From before I ever found this chapel. From a grave my grandfather used to mention. A brother who was never buried. A twin. My great-uncle Marcus Combe had a brother. Stillborn. Never baptized. Never named. Never given a plot. That night, I returned to the grave. Plot 0. The mound was gone. Replaced by flat, packed earth. And in the center, a simple stone. No chisel marks. No placement date. Just a single line. He waited. I fell to my knees. Not in prayer. In fear. Because beneath that earth was something older than the chapel. Something abandoned. Not by accident, but by design. He had no name, so the rules couldn't bind him. He had no burial, so the order couldn't include him. He was outside the congregation. Outside the service. Outside the grace of the bell. And now he found his way in. The next few days blurred. The service continued. The rain never stopped. The water in the bucket glowed a darker red each night. The prayers became harder to say. Because every time I looked up, he was closer. Always at the edge. Always in the corner of my eye. Until one night, I found him standing at the altar. cloaked in mist. And behind him, the second congregation, faceless, formless, all seated in the pews as if they'd always been there. "What are you?" I asked. He didn't speak. He just tilted his head, and I saw that his blank forehead had begun to crack. Something inside was trying to carve its way out. A new rule, forming without permission. A rule not written in the sacred journal. A rule that did not follow tradition. Rule 0. Those who were forgotten will return to be remembered. And then I understood. This wasn't a haunting. It was a correction. A soul denied service had written his own, and now he wanted the chapel to follow. The last night I saw him, he stood in the rain, arms outstretched. All 43 congregation members stood behind me. But when I turned, none of them were looking at the altar. They were looking at me. And slowly, they knelt. All of them. Not in worship. In warning. Because they knew what I was about to do. I walked to the altar, and for the first time, I reached for the second journal. The one hidden beneath the floorboards. The one reserved for new laws. The one Mororo never touched. And with a trembling hand, I wrote, Rule 0. Service may not be denied to the unseen. The ink bled. The candlelight dimmed. And then the bell rang. 6 times. Then a 7th. And every grave in the cemetery cracked open, just a little. I haven't seen the visitor since. But his pew remains empty. The soil no longer breathes. And the congregation has stopped watching me. Instead, they look at the door, waiting for the next one to knock. Because now that Rule 0 is written, the forgotten can come home. And I am a caretaker too. Forever.